I'll call the meeting to order. We'll let the minutes show word is here except for Abt and Tubin. For admin, we have Grendel, Burkhalter, Rozeski, and Woodward. Proof of public notice for
Robert, do you need
Wisconsin
this?
statutes. Notice of this committee meeting was posted on Thursday, August 1st, 2024, per Tom Burkhalter, District Administrator. I'd like a motion indicating the resolve of notice being legally posted.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Mission statement. Viroqua area schools will nurture excellence, unlock potential, and ignite passion. Community survey results, school perceptions.
Sounds like me.
That is.
So you did say you have a screen in front of you that you can see what I just pulled up.
Yep.
Great, good start. Well, I got a pretty clean report for you tonight. So I don't think I'll need too much of your time. Your data is pretty darn self-explanatory, but nevertheless, let's talk a little bit about how it's set up. Excuse me. So we won't spend a lot of time on blue slides because there's nothing new there. Blue slides, we've replicated everything that was in your survey. Not as important tonight because this is probably fairly fresh in your mind, but it will be, a couple of weeks, couple of months down the road, a couple of years if you want to revisit, what you talked about, how you talked about it, all of that will be in here. Yellow are demographics. Who took your survey, from where, so on. We'll spend the most time on green. That's your results. And then certainly I'll leave some time for wrap up and questions at the end. This is this isn't our first rodeo slide. In fact, that's also true for Viroqua. I worked with you 3 to 4 years ago, something like that. But we were founded in 2002. We've conducted over 10,000 staff, parent, student, and community surveys across more than 1,000 districts who have all done, are doing, will be doing what you're doing here, which is navigating that strategic planning and long-term referendum planning process. But enough about us. Let's talk about you, the good stuff. Your survey closed up on July 17th. So coming up about 3 or so weeks ago, you landed at 870 total respondents, which is more than what you had last time. I never really know what to make of a summer survey. I always worry about it a little bit, and maybe I shouldn't. In your last survey, it was during the school year, and you actually ended up with more respondents now. So whatever you did to get the word out that this was coming, great, it worked. Excuse me, and your response rate's also a little higher than normal. Our average response rate is about 15 to 17%. So you're above that, which is great. But even if you were around average, our accuracy rate is about 94%, which means that what the data tells us and what ultimately happens on election day matches about 94.5% of the time since 2020, 2019 or so. So you got more than enough data here to be able to make a predictive result for something that you could consider moving forward. Your margin of error is a very unfortunate named statistical measure because it's an error that you can't do anything about and we can't do anything about. It is all a function of how big your community is. The smaller your community, the wider your margin of error. So when we're working in the La Crosses, the Green Bays, the Wauwatosa's of the world, they got a lot of people that live there. So their margin of error can be sometimes less than 1%. You're obviously not that big. So when we work in places like the Drummonds of the world, where there's only a few hundred people year round, their margin of error can be much wider. So really it all comes down to how big is your community and how confident can we be then on either side of your predictions. So I guess I'd ask if you're taking notes or just want to leave something in the back of your mind, maybe about 3.5% plus or minus though, is your margin of error. More on who took your survey. A couple of pieces of good news here. So I like to see a broken bell curve. And that's what I found. So why do I say that? Well, it's okay to be overrepresented in your 65 plus. You are actually 19.9% of folks within your school district boundary. So not Viroqua itself, but within the district boundary, 19.9% are 65 plus. Over 1/3 of your survey takers are 65 plus. That's okay because not all age groups will vote at the same rate. It's true in Viroqua, it's true in Wisconsin, it's true nationwide. You're going to have the fewest amount of 18 to 24-year-olds that show up. That is very normal. But your 65 plus will be there. They will be there on election day. They are loyal voters, and they're the most likely to be on a fixed income. And they can be a little bit harder to reach because they are not employed by you very likely. They are very unlikely to have kiddos still enrolled in the school unless they're taking care of another family member. So whatever you did to get the word out, that's good because it's okay to be overrepresented there. and you actually have more 65 plus than you did last time. None of that is a bad thing. Otherwise, you got a bell curve, and that's about what I would expect. Your longest bars otherwise are 35 to 54. A lot of staff are going to be in that range. A lot of parents are going to be in that range, and they're pretty motivated to take a school-based survey. We then asked more or less, do you live here? Which begs the question, logically, why would you send this to people who don't live here? I mean, that'd be a good question. There's a couple of reasons why that might happen. Staff are under no requirements to live within your district boundaries, but they have an email address on file, so they will get the survey too. If I'm a parent in the Viroqua area and I choose to open enroll into the district, by definition, I don't live there, or I wouldn't need to open enroll in. They'll get the survey because they have a parent email address on file. Or if I simply have a mailbox or a PO box for some land in the area, but I don't live there, because it's on file, I'm going to get the survey. But all that being said, yes, people who don't live there will get it, but we take them out. We are not going to focus. We are not going to include the 8% that you see here. We are going to focus on the 92% that said yes, because they are the ones that get to control an election and a referendum within the Viroqua area schools. Everybody else will take out. Then, after we know if you live here, where is the next question? I did double check this with Tom. Sounds like this is kind of about what you would expect based on the population centers of your district. But you have representation from every sliver of municipality that in some way, shape, or form pays taxes to you, right down at the bottom to the town of Freeman and town of Hamburger. That's good too. Sometimes if I see some zeros at the bottom, I get a little nervous because then I think, ooh, was the mailing list not perfect, or did I miss a municipality? But the fact that all municipalities are included here gives me more confidence in that the people who should have received a survey did. Perhaps unsurprisingly, though, about 70% of your survey takers are either from the city or town of Viroqua.
And Hamburg is what, two registered voters or something like that?
Freeman has the two.
Freeman's the two.
Freeman
Yeah.
has the
So we got one of the
Got
two
him.
at least.
Nice,
Got
we
him.
got him. Good communication. Final demographic
Also,
then.
we only got one anyway.
Hey, that's all good.
Final demographic then, 2 questions that will get us to 3 groups. So we want to know how staff are feeling. They're arguably the most influential in the community when it comes to school-related things. They are the ones, much more so than any administrator and board member, they're going to get stopped at the grocery store or the post office and say, hey, something's going on at school. Tell me about it. So we really want to know how staff are feeling. Parents too. They're obviously by definition really connected to what's going on at school, but your your non-parents, non-staff are the biggest chunk of your community. So we're going to look at each of those groups, in isolation in just a moment. Your staff, your parents, your non-parents, non-staff. Here's the blue. So once again, not going to spend a lot of time here. We asked some questions to guide your survey. So overall, we wanted to talk about what your school's tax rate is now. Talked a little bit about why you're investigating a solution to some budget challenges. In other words, kind of the, how did you get here? Why are you asking me for help as a survey respondent? And then your options, being very clear about what you did in 22 with a capital referendum and what that means and what you can and cannot do with that money. But then the operational referendum, which I know your voters have voted on before. You and just about every other district in the state. This is not a Viroqua thing. 86% of school districts in Wisconsin have investigated what you're doing. 88% of those in your conference and region have as well. And then noting that the one you got in the books is set to expire next year. And then there were the options. So all of them were over 5 years. First one being 1.1. And so as a survey taker, I want to know that total number because that's what I'm going to see in a ballot. I don't get to see a tax impact. I see the total number on a ballot. So we want to start to get that out there. Certainly the length of the referendum. And then a little taste of like, sure, maybe I'll say yes, maybe I'll say no, but what are you going to do with my money? If I choose to say yes, how will you spend it? So a couple of check marks here, noting what your plans are should a community member decide to approve additional funding. And then obviously the way everybody makes their decision, what is this going to cost me based on my property, my home value? We do that based on the definition of a mill rate. So 100,000 makes it about as easy as you can for multiplication's sake. Option 2, structured the same way, except it was 1.3 million. And then option 3, same, but 1.5 million. And here's the meat of it. This is your data right here over this slide and the next one. A lot of numbers here, a lot of groups, but let's take it one thing at a time and it'll come together pretty quickly. So I'm going to begin in the upper left. Your non-parents, non-staff are by far the biggest chunk of your community. In fact, they represent about 70% of your community in total. So whenever I see that label, or sometimes we put them in purple, I put my eyes there first because most people are going to be there. Parents are kind of in the middle, highly engaged again because they're parents. They are about 30% or so of the community. So less than half the size of the first bar. Staff, really influential, just not that many of them though. Like in terms of raw numbers, there's just much fewer of them that will make up the pool of your voters on election day. So again, whenever I see non-parents, non-staff, I always put my eyes there first because that will give you the best indication of which way the wind is blowing. Then I start to work down. So what this is telling me here is if you, as the Board of Education, decided to put this dark green on the ballot, which corresponds to 1.5 million, fewer than 1/3 of the biggest chunk of your community would support it. So we have to take that off the table. 1.5 is not going to be supported by your voters. But then the logic is, how low do I need to go until I cross the 50% threshold? And it's only one step lower. So I count 2 down, you're in the kind of the middle green here. You're well north of 50% for your non-parents, non-staff, and that corresponds to 1.3 million per year. Your parents, in the exact same boat. They cross 50% threshold among 1.3 million, as do your staff. I'm going to come back to this slide in just a moment, but let me show you how to put these pieces together, and then I'm going to slide back once more. What this equation is telling us here is if you, as the Viroqua Area Board of Education, decided to put 1.5 million on the ballot over the course of 5 years, how many people would support it? Or what proportion of voters would support it on election day? And is that above or below 50%? Because not all groups are the same size, we have to weight the groups accordingly, depending on how big they are. So 43% of your parents would support a $1.5 million referendum per year. They're 30% of the community, so we put a 0.3 in front. Same logic over here for your non-parents, non-staff. I mentioned they're 70% of your community. They came in at 29% support. So if you put a 1.5 million 5-year non-recurring referendum on the ballot, about 1/3 of the community would support it. You do cross majority, though, at the next level. So what this is saying is if you decided to put a $1.3 million referendum on the ballot per year, we would expect about 58.7% of your community to support it. So that seems to be the sweet spot there. Not 1.5, but you do cross 50% plus 1 at 1.3 million per year. Going back a slide, I mentioned that I wanted to talk about a few other things here. Those things being, well, I guess, 2 main things. One, you really don't have a lot of undecideds. Relatively speaking, that's not a bad place to be. If I'm very supportive of a referendum, there are fewer folks to get on my side. If I vehemently oppose a referendum, there are fewer folks to get on my side because most people have already made up their mind. So I'm looking here at this gray, the 7% of non-parents, non-staff who are not sure. If that had been close to 20%, I wouldn't have blinked an eye. That's pretty normal for non-parents, non-staff. You're about 1/3 of that. So again, people are telling you, I already know how I'm going to vote here, which makes I think the homework moving forward a little bit easier because it leads to much less wishy-washy data. People are telling you like it is. Your parents and your staff, there's really not a lot of people who haven't made up their mind after reading your survey. The other part here is your reds. Those are the folks that didn't support any referendum. Typically for non-parents, non-staff, if that was 1/4, I would have moved right on and never thought about it again. That's normal. You're below that. So what I'm learning is there's just aren't as many folks that are going to be always no voters in Viroqua relative to a lot of the other districts we work with. Your no folks are just a little bit smaller. So, again, there's fewer people who haven't made up their mind, but the benefit of that is it's really clear data, which you're seeing here. 1.5, absolutely no. 1.3 million, well above 50% plus 1. By the way, if you're curious, 1.1 million came in at about 70% or so. Other data then that maybe hopefully you won't end up needing in order to avoid cuts. But should you need cuts, this is what your community is telling you, or where your community is telling you to begin. The question read, should the district delay, cut, reduce X thing? We broke it down by subgroup again. So for instance, should the district delay updating computers, servers, and other technology? These numbers that you see here are based on the scale that's up at the top of the slide. So if I said yes, I as a survey taker want you to cut that thing, my score was given a 10. If I said no, I don't want you to cut that thing, my score was given a weight of 1. The median of that scale down is 5.50. So when I'm eyeballing these numbers for the first time, any number that is above 5.50, that group is saying cut this thing. Anything below 5.5, that group is saying no, don't cut that thing. I think what you're seeing here corroborates what we just learned on the previous slide. Only one number, it actually is right at the median, 5.5 for your staff. They landed right in the middle in terms of delaying updates to class materials and textbooks, and a little bit further behind for delaying updating computers, servers, and other technology. That's also fairly high for parents and caregivers and non-parents, non-staff. That's pretty common. That's kind of a post-COVID thing. People feel like they did the technology. They don't want it anymore. They got enough technology. They really don't want to have to deal with it anymore. That's a lot of what we're seeing there. But other than that, you're not seeing any number above 5.5. But that makes sense. People aren't necessarily expecting you to make cuts because they're saying, I'm going to support something here. So don't cut a thing that I would then expect you to use my dollars to support. The other way to use this is by kind of knowing what you should never touch. If you can avoid cutting what thing, what should you really avoid cutting? Class sizes, your community is telling you don't begin there. And your community is also telling you anything that you're kind of in the business of doing, anything that sounds academic-like. So your courses for your youngest kiddos in the elementary school, your courses for middle school and high school kiddos. People don't want you to reduce building maintenance because they get it. You know, the longer you wait to do a facility update, construction costs don't get any cheaper. They know that those things are just going to balloon over time. So the higher the number, cut that thing, but none of them are above 5.5. Lastly, you saw an increase. So the increase was on the question, which read, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend us, the district, to a friend or a family member? Perfect score is a 10. I would be extremely likely as a survey taker to recommend you. If my score is a 0, I'm extremely unlikely. So got to be between 0 and 10. Those are your guardrails. Higher the better. You're up from last time. 6.90 to 6.98. That's a pretty big celebration, especially knowing that you had some capital work a couple of years ago. The fact that people are still moving, you're moving in the right direction. That's not all that uncommon, especially in referendum type surveys. You know, and it's probably self-explanatory, but when you need some financial help, people are just overall less satisfied with you in general. But that's not the case for you. You know, you're still moving in the right direction, and that's great. That's certainly not common over the last 5 years. So one, you're on the right side of the fence. People are certainly above neutral for you. The other way I look at this slide is just eyeballing it, and you got a lot more greens than you do reds at the bottom. The third and final way I like to look at this slide is by summing up my 8s, my 9s, and my 10s. When I do that, 19 and 21 is 40, plus another 11 is 51. So I'm over majority. Why do I do that? Because the research behind this question suggests that anybody who gives themselves an 8, a 9, or a 10 is an ambassador on your behalf. In other words, they will go out and talk well about what Viroqua area schools is doing without you having to do anything. They're the ones that will initiate that conversation. You don't have to motivate them to be there. They're already there. So for instance, they're the ones that will stop somebody in the weekend softball tournament concession stand line and say, hey, such and such a thing is really going well in Viroqua. You should check that out. Whether it's a rival school or a local parochial school or whatever the case may be, there are over half of your majority, or excuse me, half of your survey takers, a majority of which are in that camp. Has that happened where it's north of majority? Probably. I don't remember the last time. You know, normally it's somewhere between about 20 and a third, 20% and about a third. So you blew that out of the water. I know you hired us to do a referendum survey, but the reason I really dwell on this slide in a good way is because it's really important to understand how people will behave on election day. If I'm really mad at you and I don't think things are going really well, very few people will say, boy, I really don't like things, but I will give you more money. It's just not how people think. There has to be kind of some semblance of, yeah, things are going well. I like this. I'm satisfied. I trust you. I'm willing to help you out with an additional property tax increase. So it is really good insight into how your voters will land. And you're well above neutral to the fact of being about 2 points above neutral. So I'm gonna take a swig of water. That's actually the end of the report, but take me where you need to be. If you have any questions about any of those equations I had up before or kind of how we landed, by all means, let me know.
Looks good, straightforward, pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I don't see any big issues.
Surprises
Yeah,
or
it's just straightforward where it lands and everything, so.
Angie, anything? I'm not sure if you can come off or have any questions.
Yeah, and I think, two things, and we can get into the numbers. Really happy with the number of surveys. That was
Yeah.
very good to see, and surprising that we beat 2022 specifically.
good
Like
then.
that was good then, that was really, really cool to see. And I'm very proud of not only the board or administration, but definitely our staff. When we look at that last slide, that says, hey, 4 years of the most tumultuous times that educators have ever seen. To say that our local community increased in their support and their probability of recommending us to somebody else is really incredible in this time. I mean, those are two things that I'm very, very, very proud of collectively. And that doesn't happen without everyone doing an outstanding job.
Trying to stay out of the news.
Yeah.
For negatives anyway.
Yeah,
For quite a few years, right, Ken?
yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah, anything, questions, comments, concerns about anything, for Rob. Rob, I mean, and this is the piece where and I'm not just blowing smoke here, Rob. School
If you
perception
did, that's fine. I'm happy.
You're okay with it? No, they do just an outstanding job. When we look at what they did for us the last referendum and how close they were on their, on where they thought people were gonna come in, versus where they did, it was unbelievably close. And to get this kind of data analysis, that is so palatable and easy to understand, it's just not normal. And so I really do appreciate what they're able to do. It's pretty incredible.
Tell all your friends. I was looking for more friends.
I don't recall what our percentage was for the capital referendum. Is that around 58 also?
It was very close to that actually, Rob, wasn't it? It was, I think, I'd have to look.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't think it was above 60. It was somewhere in the upper 50s, I think.
Yeah, it was in the upper, I think it was like 59 and we came in at 50, no, it was 58, we came in at 57 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
It was really close, but yeah, we were very similar as far as that. Yeah, we're in the same ballgame for sure.
So anything, Rob, in the general economy, that can throw a curveball here at from these results? Stock market didn't do so well.
Yeah, I guess the
Other
good
things,
yes, but I think the fact that you're only 3 or so weeks away from your resolution deadline, ballpark. I don't know what exactly that date is. And you're only looking, well, actually 3 months from today, I think exactly is your referendum. If you decide to move forward. So if it was a little longer, I get a little nervous when somebody sits on our data for 8, 9 months and then tries to take something. Too many things can happen. It can get a little stale. Am I going to say no, that a stock market effect won't happen or something to the effect of new jobs data or something like that? Yes. However, even with that, and this is now I'm looking like 2018, so pre-COVID, over the last 6 or so years, our predictions have stayed within pretty close of about 2.5% of between the prediction and what ultimately happens on election day. So do I want to say those things can happen? Yes. But I think based on the timeline, it won't move, save another global pandemic. I don't think it's going to move enough where you're going to see a change from that. So am I going to say never? No, but I still think what you see here is going to be pretty darn close to what happens on election day. The other reason for that is, and this is not a Viroqua thing, obviously you'll probably plan to begin communicating immediately after a resolution moves forward. Most people probably aren't going to think really critically until around Halloween. They're busy, within a month, they're going to have kids back in school. They got to figure out what bus their kids are going on. Where's the bathroom? Staff members are going to learn a new set of names, and non-parents, non-staff are thinking about football games on Friday. People are busy and they're smart and curious, but they're busy. They don't have a lot of time and they'll be engaged, but a lot of people probably just won't think about it until late October because of how many other things they have on their plate. And so your data probably will stay pretty stable.
Admin, any questions? Rob, I think this went about what you predicted where he's like, this should be relatively clear cut. There's not much to discuss. And that's not how a lot of these conversations go.
No.
Almost always you're going to be on a line with some group or something. We're pretty clear here.
Whatever you did to get that word out, save that mailing list or save those messages because it worked. Even with your 65 plus folks, they knew about this thing, and like Tom said, your response rate went up. So whatever you did, it worked. It doesn't mean I'm going to say yes. I might still say no, but I can't say that I didn't know about it, and I can't say that I didn't have an opportunity to learn about it because of your solid response rate.
I think if we show off the building
Yeah.
projects, some of those.
Not tonight.
Yeah, not right now.
Right.
Let's wait.
Right.
Let's
But I
wait
mean-
till, yep.
I wonder
There.
how many of them have not been on campus
Yep.
and haven't seen what we're doing.
Yep.
Probably some of them are 25, 30 years.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
We can find ways to get them in or get the
Yep.
videos out. to
Yep,
them.
we've got the open house that's coming up in August,
Yeah.
29th. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So we'll do that one. That's the night after the back to school night because we didn't want to get those two lines crossed. We got enough people on campus for back to school night. And that'll be over at the elementary. So that'll be really good to see, kind of gauge what the community thinks about our changes, which I think they're gonna love.
Yeah.
That elementary's looking outstanding.
So you get the black on the soffit there.
Not yet. It's not gonna be black. It'll be a dark gray. It'll match.
colors?
It'll match the. I finally got some orange in this district, Robert. Come on now. Be happy with that.
We're satisfied.
All right, any other questions for Rob? We can always discuss more as we let him get on with his night. How many more you got tonight, Rob?
Just one, but their data is way worse. So I'm not. If you keep me here, if you need to, I don't.
We won't name that district.
Yeah.
Got it.
No.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tom, let me know if anything comes up after I hang up. Otherwise, we'll see you soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yep, bye. So he had 4 presentations, I think, tonight. So it's a busy night for him.
Are those capital? I can't remember what you said. Two capital and
Two
two.
capital, two, I think it was 2 and 2. So,
That's that time.
yeah, it is that time. Yep. So,
So the results of the survey, will you put them on the website?
we can put them on the website. We can also put this recording on the website.
Oh,
We're
right.
still, we're still
Right.
recording, so we
Right.
will put that on the website. When we look at the last referendum, we did very similar. Any meeting we had that was referendum related was recorded and then uploaded to the referendum page.
Right,
I think our community responded very, very well. I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel.
no,
I think we have a pretty good model to follow, to get similar results. So essentially, yeah, looking for some direction from the board. I think we didn't really talk about it, but I think the data was clear enough.
Pretty
That
clear.
that's where, you know, we should look at making that resolution at 1.3, but I want to make sure I'm hearing from the board appropriately so that we can put the right message on that agenda, you know. Beth and I would
There's
then
such a
start-
distinct difference between 1.3 and 1.5, even when you look at the monetary amount. And then you just get just enough more from 1.1 to 1.3. And it looks like it's supported, I'd say. Let's go for it.
Stick with that.
Huh?
Stick with that.
Yeah, 1.3.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, you know, when you looked at the last referendum as well, it was,
Should be
remember, we're not gonna
same thing.
pretend that we know our community better than what they.
Right, and
Yep.
we
Mhm.
parceled
Mhm.
so that and that's how it went.
And I really do like Rob's approach of, we're gonna take this number, multiply it by 70% and not take this number,
Right.
multiply it by 30%.
Great.
We're not gonna count the, you know, those that don't live here. We're not gonna count the, you know, even the staff and the vote, like, we're gonna get this number to something that I think is really, really solid. So again, what they do, it's crazy.
So we need to do this at the August meeting.
It has to be at the
Yep.
August meeting.
Yep.
That's gonna be your one opportunity.
Yep, so that it can
Yep,
be in November, so,
yep. So what we'll
And we-
do, yep,
you know, other people say, you don't wanna do it at a presidential, yeah, you get everybody out. And you know what, we only have two options anymore versus in the past, we had many options, you could do it. You know, go for it, and then you truly get what the public wants.
well, and this is, I think,
That's what you
listening
wanna
to the
do.
public. We're listening to our
Yeah.
voters. So what that'll look like is Beth and I will contact our Quarles and Brady tomorrow to work on some of that resolution language so that we can start to get that process down.
Chris can dig right in.
Yeah, there we go. Yep.
Resolution
Yep.
language.
So lucky Chris. But we'll be able to, what's that, Mike?
Where at?
Yeah, there you go. Whereas, get ready for that one, but
Yeah,
yeah, just you know, if you have questions as we go, don't hesitate to reach out and we'll continue to be as prepared as possible for that August meeting. I just want to make sure that if you are gonna have questions, because we only have the one shot for the November,
Mhm.
you know, we want to make sure all those questions are able to be answered that night. If you do have some before that, shoot them my way so that I can make sure that we have all of the financials and information prepared for you guys as necessary.
Well, Mike's still here.
Yeah.
I had questions and it was relates to from 1.1 to 1.3. It takes about $23 per 100,000,
Mhm.
get to 200,000, same thing from 1.3 to 1.5. Then how do we go from 550 to 1.1 for only $4? That only gets me 36,000.
Yep. Mike is probably the best person to talk about that, but it's through our Baird forecast model, essentially. So as we're going through it, it comes up in a little bit different way because of some aid, you know, that we'll get. That you know, changes, you know, what aid we get. But then also with the current referendum where we're sitting, that's where, you know, that's just where that kind of number fell.
And,
Mhm.
I mean,
Well, it should be $64, closer to 4.
well, but you gotta remember, we over levied a little bit
Yeah.
last year into fees and debt.
Yeah.
So when you pull that and to try to explain that, that becomes a lot harder, but from where we were and what we levied last year, we will then not do that defeasance in Fund 39 as much as we did last year. The net impact on that would be this, with that and some of the Fund 80 change in that levy.
Mhm.
We went
I
back and
understand
forth,
that it's
and
a
if we
change.
kept everything the same, it gets almost harder to explain.
So technically then, if we didn't approve a referendum, we'd go down about $120 per $100,000.
Depends on what you did with your debt.
It depends on, yeah, what you did with your budget. with
If you
that.
kept it the same as last year, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or if
No,
you
I
brought it
know what
down.
you're saying.
It's,
This doesn't equate out.
It does when you're talking about paying off that debt early and then pulling back on paying off that debt early and just pulling it back to where our normal schedule of paying that
So
debt would
it's
be.
not really the cost of the referendum, it's the increase after, if you
Correct.
do that.
What it would
Yeah.
increase if you did. it.
If you,
So the survey then lacks some background.
I don't know if it lacks background. We went back and forth on this in a multiple surveys and Mike and I do pose the question. It's really hard to explain to, in a short survey.
Think
how
about
that
how
works.
hard it is for you.
And you've been
You
doing.
You are top on all that finance stuff. For general public to understand it, as long as they see those numbers, they're gonna just say, no, it's the cumulative effect. And when people would ask me, I said, it's the cumulative effect and it's how state aid works and how then you pay off other things. And there's not an easy answer, but that is the cost if we borrow that much.
So is those dollars repeatable that we're saving? Meaning, will they continue for the life of this 5-year referendum? Or are they just one-offs?
You're saying,
Yeah.
So
no, Tom and I had this conversation. When this district approved their first $250,000 referendum, it was to make sure that we maintained the building so that we didn't end up back in a situation where we had the deferred maintenance that was coming due. And we had to have a $10 million referendum. With the status of where we're at right now, and that's what the survey was, we're paying for operations now with the referendum, the operating referendum. We can't just focus on the maintenance items.
which is a change from historically.
Which,
what we have.
exactly,
It is a change,
it is,
yeah.
and that's why I told Tom, I said, we have to be very upfront with that.
Very
And that is a change, and it's because it has not kept up. It was easier, everybody understands that, but by the same token, it doesn't change the fact that that's where we're at.
I think the other thing to consider is when Mike and I are giving these numbers for, putting this into the system and trying to get the best guess that we can. We're also being ultra conservative. And what I mean by that is we're putting in zero property value increases because that's how Mike and I budget every year, right? That's not how most districts budget. They go and try to guess and try to play the market and, I think it's gonna go this, so that's where I think our mill rate's gonna be. We hold at 0 and then it always comes in better than what we have said it would come in. The other one, and we talked about this a little bit the last time, that we don't know, and it will have an impact, but I can't tell you what, is the Milwaukee situation, right? With the multiple tens of millions of dollars coming back in. We can't spend that, right? It's solely a local tax levy decrease. And so that's money coming back to us, but it's not like, now we have more money to spend per student. No. And so what I can't tell you is exactly how much that is going to be, but both of those things are not in this survey, right? So we are trying to be as conservative as we can on that end to make sure that when this comes in, it's coming in better. Now, there are some things we can't control. Revenue limit increase. We can't predict if and when that would ever happen. So that's one thing that could be a variable on that local impact, because if the state says you can levy more and they don't supplement it, right, that would absolutely have an impact. And so again, it's not a guaranteed slam dunk but with what's in our control, we try to be as conservative as we can with those numbers.
Back to my original question about their dollars coming in, will they come in next year over that tax requirement or tax levy? Some of this could, for the referendum, is that the arbitrage dollars that are coming back?
Oh, yeah.
And that's only a one-time deal, correct?
The debt service, if you remember when it was structured, they took all the money that we had set aside in previous referendums, and we're using that over the next 3 years to offset. And then they structured the debt with higher payments up front and then dropped them down a little bit to level that up. To then couple that with then the increase in aid that we're gonna have for all 20 years of debt. That aid's gonna go up because we're gonna have more aid with costs. So that was all structured in there that way. I just was looking here, Robert, to answer your question, so. And we'd have to look at the actual survey. What was the cost of the 1.5 million?
$50.
$50 or something.
Yep.
yeah.
So then this matches. Let's just say our referendum to exceed the revenue limit went to 0. That number would be a decrease of 120. So I mean, to go from 550, you know, so if you kept it at 550. The number that we used would decrease 60 cents.
Yep.
60,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
60 cents.
That was mine.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, and that's, but again, that's where,
And that's where
Because there has
we
to
went
be
back and forth. I
dollars
said,
that,
wait a
you know,
second, do I need to increase our debt service? Because otherwise that's gonna be confusing to people. It's like, but we're not gonna let.
right,
You know, we're,
Yep.
we're not going to. It would be more than what we would need. The only
Right.
reason we would is if our aid went way up
Yep.
and everything went down and we said, okay, no, we can still afford it. And if we're asking people for more tax levy more in debt service, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
We haven't.
Yep.
So in answer to your question, the debt service levy this year was 2,125,000. Then we offset it with 561, so that net amount was 1,563,000. This year it's 1 million.
Yeah.
1,564,000, 1,563,000 is what is, those are the numbers that are scheduled out. It's about 1,000,005 and then it drops to 1.7. So it's not like it goes back up to 2 and we're gonna have to come up with that because that defeasance
Yeah.
dissipate.
yeah, and as far as your.
So it was the 2 million that went to 1.5 that actually.
With the
is ma-
defeasance.
That's
yes,
what is actually making this be $4.
Correct. Correct.
And it won't go from 2 million to
We over,
1.5. it'll
we
stay
over
1.5.
levied for probably 5 years. To be able to
Are you-
absorb some of this.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And then the debt service goes down and so I mean, it's what we were doing to try to maintain our mill rate. But if you could have been in Tom's office that day that we met with Rob and he's like, well, what would it cost for the?
Mhm.
I mean. 'Cause I have had that conversation. Yeah, but if it goes to 0, my taxes are gonna go down.
Mhm.
What is it really gonna cost? Okay, but.
Well, there's 2 ways to look at
Right.
it. One is the
Correct.
increase is similar to trading in your car.
Mhm,
Yep,
yeah,
You're almost
Absolutely.
done paying off your car. Now you're just gonna add because more years and it's gonna go up because the new car costs more.
yes, and again, especially when we look over the time that Mike's been here, I can't say.
Well, I've been trying to train him for 30 years.
You got him where you wanted him, huh? But as, I mean, as we're talking about that, we've got the evidence, right? That we have been very fiscally responsible and,
Well, that's part of the reason why we get the survey response.
100%.
And this went on for 13 years and probably longer than that.
Yep. So
But
again,
we've tried to do the right thing.
yes. And again, you know, that's where it's very difficult to explain public school finance to anybody, but specifically with this one. And again, your question with the arbitrage, we have many options with that, you know, on how to get it back into the taxpayer's pocket, you know, and so.
Well, I don't really want so much taxpayers' profit, but the idea of spending them wisely.
Absolutely, yep. And that's
And that's
part of the
respect for our
conversation.
taxpayers because they have given us.
Absolutely,
Just
absolutely,
like we talked about when we were maintaining the facilities, when we did the first 250, it was respect for what the taxpayers have given us.
Yep. Yes, and so that can be a conversation of, you know, what projects do we have? It can be a conversation of how do we defease debt, you know, and pay off debt early? So we're not coming back and asking for more on a more regular basis, or it can be in a Fund 46 where we do and set it aside for when we need some capital projects that we're not going to ask our community for money that time, right? And so it can be everywhere,
one
a
positive
little bit.
on the construction. The federal government's gonna get a nice check from us.
Yes.
Did you tell them they're welcome or not?
So far, since we borrowed that money, we've pulled in over 600,000 in interest income. We're gonna be limited to about 1 million, and then I think it's a percentage that we have to pay back.
Which is.
We're gonna be writing them a nice check by the time.
Yeah. Because the federal government definitely did a lot of work for this, for sure.
Yeah, right.
Remember, this is being.
Yeah, it is. Never mind, ignore what I just said. But no, again, it really comes down to being fiscally responsible and we have a history. We have some evidence over time that we have done the right thing, when we have the opportunity and paying back again, paying off debt early. That's always fiscally responsible. Making sure we're investing wisely in our systems so that we're capturing the benefits of that. Always going to be, those things that are fiscally responsible.
It's kind of hard to start doing operations out of a referendum like this because you're kind of on that slippery slope. Because you really have, it's not like you replace a furnace and you don't have to do it for 30 years.
Right. Yep.
This is an individual salary that's going to be
Yep.
year after year.
Well, and I think that this is where we've talked about that as a board before, when we're talking about recurring and non-recurring referenda, right? And there's some additional accountability when we go back and say, we're doing non-recurring so that in 5 years we can, reevaluate and we will see where we're at. And we're going to ask you,
For more next time.
Actually, it depends on what the state does, right? It depends on how the state meets the needs of districts, including ours. And so again, what it does is it gives you that accountability that you have to continue to go to your community and one, see how we're doing, right? And that they'll tell you, via a vote, how they think you're doing. But then again, going through and not writing this off into perpetuity, and then it becomes a major issue with, all right, if we have this, we're gonna spend it, right? And then next year, everything gets more expensive and now we don't have it, right? And it gets a potential for districts to burn through it much quicker. But we know, hey, by that 5th year, we're gonna still have 1.3, right? It's not going up. It's not a piece where we're doing an escalator or anything like that. So again, pros and cons to everything, but I think our community has spoken.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, yes.
I hate to put you on the spot, but I have for 13 years.
One last
gotta get it.
opportunity.
You gotta get it one more time. Yep.
Depending on.
Anything else? That's it.
Be ready.
Anything else from the group? Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.